Breaking news here in Batshit Bonkers Britain, where it turns out a male illegal has been using a friend's NHS ID to work as an agency nurse. And the kicker is, his friend is female and he's male, and he's been providing intimate care to patients in A&E as a male masquerading as a female who's not actually a nurse but with NHS ID, and no one even questioned it. What a time to be alive over in France. I mean, it's just like Ocean's 11. People have broken into the Louvre and stolen jewellery worth an absolute fortune, stolen to order. I mean, the level of complexity and cunning of their plan was a miracle. What they did was they got a ladder in broad daylight and used a circular saw, walked in, took the jewels, and then walked out. I know how they overcame security. I mean, it just gives you faith in the people that are protecting our cultural heritage, doesn't it? And finally, Piers Morgan on BBC morning breakfast sofa, unwashed and unshaven, and his teeth melted away by years of lies, trying to punt his book and tickets for some godforsaken show with him that simply won't sell. What a terrible tragedy to see one so great fall so very low. I do very much pity him. That's it. Batshit Bonkers Britain.
In her latest monologue titled Batshit Bonkers Britain, Katie Hopkins once again weaponizes satire to paint a grimly absurd portrait of modern Britain and beyond. She opens with the NH scandal, a male illegal immigrant allegedly impersonating a female nurse, using it as a metaphor for a system so broken that deception has become ordinary. The outrage is layered with mockery. Hopkins doesn't just expose incompetence. She ridicules a bureaucracy that sees but doesn't question. Her segue to France's Louvre heist amplifies this theme. Civilization's great institutions, from health to culture, collapsing under negligence. By the time she lands on Piers Morgan, she shifts from sarcasm to outright cruelty, describing him as unwashed and unshaven, his teeth melted by years of lies. It's both performance and punishment. A media figure attacking another fallen media figure to highlight decay in British public life. Hopkins's tone is venomous yet deliberate, equal parts comedy and commentary. Beneath the insults lies a consistent message. Britain's establishment, from its hospitals to its broadcasters, is rotting from within, and she's simply the messenger holding up the mirror.
Very interesting, isn't it? I mean, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown together increased public spending in the UK to pretty much unprecedented levels back when they were in government. So it's interesting that now he's coming out criticising Rachel Reeves' spending plans. I mean, I think he's got a point, to be honest. I think the UK finances are not in a good place. The government has essentially already briefed out in advance that they are going to be raising taxes at the coming budget. That's essentially priced in now. Growth is really bad, and tax receipts are very bad as well. And so I think, to be honest, he's got a point.
But in some ways, he is responsible for the kind of ratchet effect that taxation has taken over recent years. The freezing of the thresholds. One of the biggest reasons why people at the top end of the income scale are taxed so heavily is because those high rate thresholds have been frozen for so long. The rich are paying a greater proportion of tax than they ever have before.
Yeah, well, I think there's two factors here. The first is basically the discretionary spending that Rachel Reeves has chosen to increase spending by. That's to the tune of some 75, 76 billion pounds, and that's an official Treasury statistic, and that's things like public sector pay deals, more money on the NHS, more money for sort of green projects and things like that, things that she's chosen to do. Obviously, that's probably unwise, but there are also long-term structural issues facing the UK public finances and the UK economy that anyone would have had to deal with, including Rishi Sunak if he'd stayed in power, and that's things like the upwards pressure on pensions budgets, the cost of the triple lock, which is forecast to just the triple lock, not the pension, to increase public spending by by £15 billion per year between now and 2029 to 2030. And of course, the ever-expanding welfare budget with more and more people slipping out of work. So there are short-term factors and there are long-term factors as well. What's become very clear, though, is that the Labour backbenchers have got no appetite whatsoever for spending cuts. They don't think it's what they were elected to do.
And they certainly won't want to see a higher rate of tax cuts. They want to tax richer people, and I don't think you are particularly rich, particularly where the 40p rate kicks in. They want to see it extended. He's completely out of step with his own party.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And as you say, Miriam, the higher earners in our society, people that pay the higher rate, not the top rate, but just the higher rate, are servicing a bigger and bigger and bigger share of the tax burden. And that can only go so far before you actually start losing receipts because of the damaging effect that it has on incentives. If you wound the 50,000 threshold for the high rate back to the prices of 2019, it would kick in at 42 grand. I mean, that strikes me as an insane threshold to start paying 40%. So something is going to have to be done, and it's going to have to be quite deep and quite radical.
Yes, I was reading this morning that when that higher rate was introduced, almost no teachers would have been in the higher rate. Now, 1 in 4 teachers. It's a huge disincentive to work. But we always, we say frequently in this country how highly we are taxed. And we are compared to previous years, but we're not that highly taxed compared to other countries, European countries, for example. Why do we feel the pressure so intensely compared to maybe some of our European neighbours?
Well, whether you're highly taxed depends on who you are. If you're someone who is paying the higher rate or the additional rate, then you are quite highly taxed, especially once you throw in national insurance and loads of other factors as well. If you are a basic rate payer, you're only paying 20p in the pound and you've got the personal allowance on the first 12,000 of your income anyway. The average American, and we think of them as being a low tax society, pays 25 cents on the dollar in direct income taxes once you add everything together. So the truth is, if you are an average taxpayer or a below average earner in the UK, you're actually not paying that much income tax. And it's partly because the Tories, understandably, try to protect people from the effects of rising public spending. But the result is now you've got an ever-shrinking tax base with a smaller selection of people paying the overall tax bill, and that can only go so far before you start losing.
Well, wouldn't one sensible reform, why do we have national insurance and income tax? National insurance does not pay money directly into the NHS. It might have done originally, but it certainly doesn't now. It's just two hugely expensive taxes to administer with a vast bureaucracy.
I agree with you. It's essentially another form of income tax, and it's a political problem as well, because people feel, because of the name, that it is a form of insurance. So when you talk about things like the cost of the state pension, the cost of the triple lock, people fairly say, well, I paid in for all of those years, and they did, but unfortunately that's not how it's financed. The state pension is financed from current spending, from current taxation, and so it's actually a misleading thing in our politics. It's essentially another form of income tax. Maybe there's a case that it should just be rolled together.
And of course, Rachel Reeves and others keep saying that they want the burden of taxation to fall on the boarders' shoulders, but of course that is already happening. I just want to show you this graph here that I think we've got in there. Here we go. So this is the proportion of different occupations, nurses, electricians, who used to pay the higher rate of tax, that's in green in 1993, but who now pay the higher rate of tax. Look at that change, Gavin. It's phenomenal. Ordinary jobs, ordinary salaries, now taxed at 40%, well, 50% once you take into account national insurance.
Yeah, and once you start losing some of those benefits that you start losing when you have a higher income, things like child benefit, that gets phased out, the personal allowance gets phased out. If you've got a student loan on top of that, you can end up getting a 70% marginal rate of tax, or even over 100%, because a friend of mine is choosing to drop down to 80% of hours, because otherwise he and his wife are going to lose their childcare entitlement. They'd actually be losing money. So there's all kinds of crazy distortions up the income distribution that really do need to be sorted out.